So it has been a spell since I last saw you, Alexis. How are you doing?
Huh?
A spell.
A spell. I'm doing okay. How about you?
All right.
You sound like
right.
You sound like somebody's grandfather. It's been a spell.
That's like a halabaji statement. I thought it was, hip, cool. Kept me in touch with the
hip.
youngins.
I don't think that was hip or cool, but I like it. Yeah, it's been a while since we had a meeting. Hey.
Yeah, since we and you look great. You sound great.
As do you.
How
Good,
have
I'm
things
exhausted.
been?
So yeah, just busy. I think for both of us, which is why we've been so MIA with these podcasts. Hey.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it's a lot of work, and we had to take a longer break than we anticipated.
It's really a lot of work.
Yeah. And
Yay!
So to tell everybody what we're expecting to do, we're expecting to come back once a month, first of every month. And that's about it. There's so much more to say than that.
Not much more to say than that. And we're back just in time for 4-3. So this was good timing since this is a big hot topic on our podcast. Yeah.
So, I mean, since this is really like the first time that we've talked since then, any changes, any differences that you've noticed with yourself or with the island?
Oh, that's one hell of a question, Darryl. I'm going to skip the any changes about myself.
That's fine.
And then, and honestly, I think with the island, I've been too damn busy to even see. It seems things are picking up. I saw that you posted recently that the first tourist ship came back in the first one in 3 years, the cruise ship. Yeah. So I imagine this summer we're either going to see a lot of people or we're going to see less because everybody can leave the country now. It'll be interesting anyways.
Fewer people are apparently coming. Domestic tourists are coming to the island, right? But flight tickets are still astronomically expensive.
Oh, unbelievable. To get off this island and get back on this island. It's crazy. I remember days when we were paying $10. It's ridiculous.
I don't remember it being that little, but I remember like 30,000.
I remember getting 30,000, 20,000, but I've definitely scored some sale tickets way back in the day, but I don't think you left the island as much as I did.
I never left the island. No.
Yeah, right. No. So
and it doesn't help that I have a fear of flying. I'm assuming you don't.
The older I get, the more fearful I am of everything. But no, I'm okay for the time being.
Well, I guess that is, and the interesting thing about that, the cruise ship that came here was the cruise ship that made all that noise and news back in February 2020, because it was the one that was docked off of Japan with all the COVID cases.
Oh, good Lord. Okay.
Right? I think there was like a couple of deaths, 600 COVID cases. Yeah. And it's the same boat that just came. There's something, there's not ironic, but it's not really like a book ending too. It's just interesting. Something to note, right?
I like that. I like the book ending. Well, yeah. It's like started with and ended with. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, but it'll be interesting spring and summer for sure.
Oh, for sure. And now that spring is here, we get to enjoy the nice weather. But one of the things that I started enjoying because of the burnout and the stress and blah, blah, blah is jimjilbongs. You like jimjilbongs?
I do like jimjilbongs. For sure I had a few friends that kept going during the pandemic, and that was a hell no for me. There's no way I was going into a hot, sweaty anything with other people during the pandemic. But I like them. And I like Jeju's. There's some nice ones here.
Yeah. Do you have a preference? Do you have like a favorite?
There was a one in Noyoung in Shinjeju above Tom and Tom's, and it had all the rooms. It had like the jade room and the pink coral room and the pizza oven room, and that was one of my favorites.
I think I just recently went there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't been in, like I said, years. Yeah.
I love I used to like going with my buddy, after drinking or, or like you just go for a soak. Yeah. But now that I'm older, it's a fantastic way to spend a Sunday just like relaxing with your family. It's great.
Yeah.
But the thing that I've noticed is like, they're not popular anymore, right? Like there are fewer and fewer people there.
That doesn't surprise me because, like I said, nobody, I certainly wasn't going during the pandemic, but maybe it's just kind of like it needs to pick back up like everything else.
I think it's a younger cultural thing that they don't like it. Like, not that they don't like it, but they don't need it anymore because my mother-in-law lives at her jimjilbong, right? Yeah. And I'm often the youngest person who goes in there.
That makes sense. It for sure is got the air of community. You know, like I live on one street. The street right behind me has a little mini one. And I always see the Ajumas walking with their, their plastic Daiso basket full of their, their stuff. But you never see anyone young, like you said. Yeah.
And that leads me to the next thing, which is something that I noticed. And this is my fancy segue.
Okay.
There was no children either, except for my daughter.
Oh, I love that though. There was, because like back in the day when you were going, like I had one in Donum that I would go to. And I think the first time I went a couple times, and the first time I saw a student, and I was like, nope, never coming to this one again. Because I don't want to, hang out in Jimjilbong where my students are.
No, that's different. Yeah. Right.
So I think so I love hearing, and also not a big fan of the children. So I love hearing that there's no kids.
Well, that's part of, like my fancy segue. It's part of the aging population is finally catching up on Jeju since we last talked, right? Yeah. So like since we last talked, the population of Jeju has actually decreased for the first time since it hit the 700,000 mark. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So because there's so few births, the population has dropped down to like 699,000, which is still a lot.
That's still a lot.
Jeju wants to be a province of 1.5 million, and the population is decreasing, which I thought was interesting.
Did they declare that? When did they say that? 1.5 million. They want to be
part of the plan. It's just part of the plan.
There's no room here. There's no places to park. But okay, good.
Because like last year, the births on the island was only 3,600. Right. Yeah. Right. There was 4,800 deaths.
Right.
Making 2022 the second year in a row for a loss of where there has been a loss in births on Jeju. Now, how many foreigners or non-Koreans do you think could live on the island? Because that was also part of the recent numbers.
I just saw I won't be able to, me in numbers. I don't remember, but I did just remember someone posted it, and I remember reading. Yeah. But I can't remember. Go ahead. Hit me with your facts.
Oh, you ruined the game. It's 21,683. 21,683.
Okay.
Interesting, huh? I like it.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's hard to kind of visualize though. Like I can't really do much with that.
No.
And most of them, and there was no breakdown of the numbers. Actually,
there wasn't.
Yeah, because there wasn't like where they were from, or like because probably a lot of them are migrant workers,
of course,
and there's only a handful of us who are not. But I always think that's kind of neat to know how many are here and how many.
Agreed. Yeah.
So on that note, shall we go do our Jeju Dialect Corner? Say hi.
Let's get some learning. Let's get some learning on.
It is so good to see you, Ju-young. Welcome back. We have another lesson, Jeju Dialect Corner. You look great. It's good to have you back, and we've missed you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been forever. Yeah, I missed you, and I missed your show, and I'm really grateful that I can be back for the Jeju dialect lesson.
Well, it wouldn't be me, you, and Jeju without you. So thank you. So how have you been in this long, unfortunate hiatus? How have you been?
Well, same old. Picking up ocean trash and surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding. Anything on a board. Yeah.
Is that a new thing that you've discovered? Your love of boards?
No, not. Well, I went snowboarding first time 10 years ago, and I broke my tailbone. Oh. So yeah, it took me some time to but skateboarding, I it's first time actually. I mean, that coverboarding, I have been coverboarding, like land surfing thing.
Longboarding?
No, not longboard, but it's just different.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's just regular skateboard. Yeah, I just started learning last year, the end of last year. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Not bad.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. No major falls. Your tailbone's still intact.
Yeah. Safe. Safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's your favorite place to skateboard?
Oh, actually, there's really cool place down in Jeongmun. It's called Pipeline.
Pipeline, yeah.
So, yeah, the owner, I know him because he's just surfer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I go there down there. Yeah.
Really? I went once. I took my daughter when they first opened.
Oh.
Yeah, and she was young, and she was way too young to try. And I've always wanted to skateboard, and so I tried.
You should try now, yeah.
I was very unsuccessful. I was very unsuccessful, and I was reminded of my failure for days afterwards because I hurt my hip pretty. I smacked it pretty good. I like to skate, like ice skating, rollerblading. That's where I feel comfortable. But I never grew up, surfing or skateboarding. But what about surfing? Jeongmun as well is your favorite place?
Yes. On Jeju, yes.
Are you surfing now?
Yeah, I mean, I surfed a lot last year, and this year I think I won Iho and Woljong.
Woljong, you can go to Woljong now and surf?
Yeah, but now the current is changing.
Yeah, isn't it Iho? You have to go to Iho, right?
It's nowadays it's sometimes Iho, sometimes Jeongmun. So it's the Jeongmun season is coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jeju, and weather on Jeju is so warm that you can literally surf all year as long as you have like a decent wetsuit.
On Jeju?
Yeah, on Jeju. Yeah.
Year round? No, I don't agree. Yes, there is the surf, but usually the winter season the surf is not that good. Very choppy and windy, and
cold.
So cold too.
Yeah. So, speaking of the water, how about you have a new word for us today?
Yes, I have a word for you guys. You guys have heard about haenyeo, which is woman diver. Right?
Women divers, yeah.
Yeah, woman diver. Yeah. Designated as UNESCO heritage. And they, whenever they dive, like before diving in, they always hold their breath, like as much they can, and then go diving, right? And then try to collect, I don't know, abalone, whatever.
Yeah.
Sora. I don't know what sora is in English.
Neither do I.
Yeah. Sora, 청개. And then as they coming up, surfacing, they are almost out of breath, right? And then right after they came out of water, they breathe out really slowly and slowly. And usually they make the sound, whistle sound, and we call it 숨비소리.
Sunbisori.
숨비소리. So
right.
Everyone, we all have different voices, So every haenyeo has different 숨비소리. So you can recognize your friend. It's like, oh, she just, came out of the water, things like that. So it's good to know. And next time you come to Jeju Island, if you see women divers, working in the water, just go closer and listen to, their sound.
That's beautiful. I didn't even think that they would have their own distinct Sunbisori. I mean, it makes sense. We all have our own voices.
Actually, I read that in the novel.
The Island of Sea Women, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's true. I think we should maybe go investigate. 'Cause, like,
yeah, maybe we should confirm that.
Yeah. Yes, you've heard them. You've heard the Sumbisori before, right? Yeah. So have I. How do how do they do that? Because it's not like they don't. It's part of their breathing technique to hold their breath for such a long period of time. It's not like, they do it for fun. It's part of that. How do they do that?
When you dive and coming up out of the water and dive again, if you repeat that, you have to control your breath. So you have to, when you breathe in, you don't want to, but slowly, and when you breathe out as well, you don't want to go like, So I think that otherwise you get dizzy, things.
That's interesting. I'll look into that for the next time we talk, because like I'd like to know. I've known of the sound. I've always been curious about like why do they specifically, like what is the benefit, or possibly there might be some disadvantages to it too. I don't know.
Or just natural.
Yeah, we're just
natural thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily whistle every time I breathe out.
And also, if you have any haenyeo friend, ask them. So there's like specific word for, haenyeo. They even when they are pregnant, they go diving, right? So back in the days, a lot of pregnant women divers, they gave birth in the water, and there's a specific word referring to that baby.
Oh.
Yeah. And I actually knew that, but forgot that word. And today I was like, texting here and there, but I couldn't.
That's a good word. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's such a, like that word in itself, it contains like a story, about that's awesome.
And well, there's a documentary. I think it was Patagonia documentary.
Right, it came out a couple of years ago. Yeah.
A woman from Hawaii came to Jeju. And she went to Byangdo, Halim, Byangdo.
The island there.
Yeah. They talk about like pregnancy and baby and stuff like that.
Right, because she was pregnant, and the Hawaiian woman was also pregnant. Yeah.
And they talked about how in the water, like out of the water, like you feel the gravity. Like you have huge stomach and you feel the gravity, but like as soon as you get in the water, you get, I don't know, like kind of feel free.
Right.
Yeah.
I did an article a couple years back, like last year ago, about a woman who was researching the haenyeo for genetics.
I was going to talk about that. Actually, that was in the novel as well, no?
What? No, I haven't read the novel. I hope not, because I wrote about it a year ago. I don't know if it would be in the novel.
Because, haenyeo can be in the water, cold water for a long time.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's true. That's been known that haenyeo are divers that dive in the coldest of waters that we know of.
I mean,
like in the winter and stuff.
Imagine, like back in the day, haenyeo went to Russia, Japan, whatever, and they didn't have wetsuit.
Yeah, they had this white cloth
like
thing,
t-shirts or whatever, and it's crazy to think that. Yeah,
and so they may have developed a genetic ability to withstand cold water, partially because the women that I interviewed hypothesized it has to do with the fact that they dived while pregnant. that may have over generations and stuff affect the fetus and allow them to sustain for possibly also to hold their breath for long periods of time so they can produce the beautiful 숨비소리. Can we, okay, quickly, we've gone so much longer. Alexis is going to be so mad at us, but 숨비소리.
Yes.
Sori means sound.
Yes.
Sunbi means...
I don't actually teach research it.
Right, but Sunbi is the Jeju Saturi part of it,
Yes.
the Jeju dialect part of it, because Sori is just sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say it for us one more time?
숨비소리.
숨비소리. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Talk to you again soon. And that was another segment with our teacher, Ju Young-han. Thank you so much. And it's so good to see her again. It was unfortunate you weren't there, but there'll be more to come in the future. Now,
Definitely.
With, as you said at the start of the episode, Sasam, Jeju 4-3, Jeju Massacre, Jeju Incident, the 75th anniversary is on the horizon. And I kind of took the opportunity recently, and not to pump my own tires or...
Well, you should, because it was good. So go ahead, pump. Wait. That's not the phrase. Pump your own tires?
Toot my own horn.
Toot my own horn. Who says pump my own tires?
Like I said in the last episode,
that's like a chore. That sounds like a chore, not like a pat myself on the back sort of thing. Okay, but go ahead, toot your own horn.
Yeah, so I took the opportunity to interview Hyun Ki-young, who's the author of Suni Samchon, which
so
is
cool that you got to meet him.
Oh,
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
It's so cool.
It's the second time I've met him, but I kind of I've been wanting to interview him for a while. So let me just go through the story.
Go through.
So I wrote the article because it's the 45th anniversary of the publication of the short story, and
that he wrote. Yeah.
He wrote it in September of 1978, not 48, and its publication is credited as being the first public reference to the massacre.
Right.
And a very interesting book that I encourage everyone to read, because it's a story about a man who returns back to Jeju after 8 years away for Jesa, which is like the memorial ceremonies that people hold.
So he was coming to be with his family and say goodbye to his like a memorial for his ancestors. And then
so everybody gets together, and he's from Bukchong. Well, he's not from he's from the town that's inspired by Bukchong-ri,
right,
which is where the largest death incident
4-3.
Massacre happened during 4-3. And during this, he finds out that one of his distant relatives had passed away, died by suicide. And the whole story, the whole story is broken up into two. One is a conversation between the relatives about what should be done about the massacre. How do you remember it? How it's under oppression, because nobody was allowed to talk about it at that time. How do you deal with the scars of Sasam when you're living with your murderers? Like, one of his relatives is actually a member of the Northwest Youth League, which are like credited with being the most brutal of those killed. The other half of the story is a retelling of the Bukchong massacre. Right. And it's credited as being the first reference of the massacre that kind of galvanized the movement or sparked the movement to uncover the truth about what happened, and eventually led to the apology of President Roh Moo-hyun in
slowly led to the apology. Yeah. So just to remind everyone, this book, the author Darryl was referencing, this book was written, published in 78. Am I correct? 78?
Yeah. So it's right here.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So
and it was published in September of 1978, and then it came out in a short story form and in a short collection of short stories the next year. And after its publication, he was arrested and tortured and beaten
for having written it and published it.
Yeah.
Because your article, Darryl, you toot your horn as much as you want, because it was really well written. And first of all, I just think it's so cool you got to sit face to face with that dude. So much history, just his history alone. Never mind the history that he was tackling in his stories. But not only did you kind of like get to talk to him, but I thought you did a great job. And I encourage everyone to go read it. I thought you did a good job again, laying out the very complicated and very confusing history of 4-3. So I thought you did a good job. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you. I appreciate you for taking the time to read it. It was, I'm really like, I was glad to see him because I wanted to, because it's the 45th anniversary. So it's to do something like this, you need an event like the 45th anniversary to write it, because otherwise it's not newsworthy for something like my news organization. So I took that opportunity to do it. But it was
45th anniversary for his book, and we're coming up on the 75th anniversary of 4/3. So just not to confuse those two signifiking numbers.
Yeah. And I took him to a random cafe in Jeju that was near where he's staying. He doesn't live here most of the time. Lives in Seoul. And the cafe is this beautiful, like concrete and glass structure that's built over this antique Jeju house. And it's just a skeleton of it left. So you're inside the cafe, but when you're inside the cafe, you're in this like wooden beam skeleton of this house that was built.
What is the name of this?
I can't remember the name, but I'll post it below.
I should have gotten that. Okay,
yeah, it was beautiful. And the owners, well, during the interview, the owners came up and just so happened to be distant relatives of Hyun Ki-young. Hyun Ki-young didn't know them, but they knew him because, you know,
of course,
famous and it's in your family line and stuff. So, and I wanted to, I couldn't include that. I couldn't include that in the piece, but that's like, everybody on Jeju knows everybody, right?
Yes, especially when you're not, you know, not a recent transplant, when you're part of the old crowd. Yeah, of course. And the ties are between the villages and everything, of course. Yeah.
And to me, that it's like, that's one of the reasons, well, maybe not reasons, but it's that's sort of integral to the massacre itself, is because it was perpetrated by people from the mainland who didn't understand the people that lived here and the connections between all the people that lived here, because people were slaughtered for helping out those that had escaped to the mountains, but they don't realize that, like, they're not just neighbors, they're like old generational family and like old generation neighbors and things like that. It's it was just a really interesting conversation with him. We talked a lot about his legacy, and because I don't know when I'm going to get
he's getting older now. Yeah. How old is he now? 89? 82. Okay.
Yeah. And he's coming with a new book about Sassam this shortly.
Oh, geez. Good Lord, really?
Yeah.
Good for him. Did he tell you? Were you able to like get some insider scoop on what it's gonna?
Oh, not so. Well, I didn't know how much time I had with him. Right. So I don't want to deal.
So you're like, let's get busy.
To stick on topic, because I need to make sure I can produce something.
Right. Your article. Yeah. Well, having said that, you were like, I encourage everyone to read the story. Is it published in different languages?
Oh, it's in English. Yeah, it's in English. I'm sure it's published in different languages. My dog's going crazy in the background. Sorry about that.
Yeah, my cats are also. Yeah, well, we have busy households. It is what it is. No worries. Yeah, so easy for people to get a hold of. We'll post, maybe we can post like some links to access it pretty easily on whatever Naver or Amazon or whatever. Yeah.
Did you have any questions about it before we get on to our next segment?
No, I do actually. Well, it's all these random things, right? Sure. So when he was coming out with this, one of my favorite part of the articles was that as most, it's not as if he knew a lot of the history. But one of the cooler parts that I thought of the story before it turned dark and, he got arrested, was that he ended up randomly rooming with a young man from Bukchon.
Yeah.
Are they still friends?
He died. He passed away a couple of years ago.
He did, Did they maintain friendship, as the book got popular and as he then was tortured? You know what I mean? Was there any talk about that friendship or that relationship?
Well, unfortunately, the man died a couple of years ago, is what Hyun Ki-young told me. But I didn't know too much about their friendship, but obviously they had some sort of relationship because he knew he had passed away. And he also he took him to the village to introduce him to all the people there.
Right. He did. I mean, he really, really went out of his way. And so then when the author, I guess you probably don't know, but I was just curious reading it, referencing then he got arrested and really, really badly tortured. Yeah. But did the other man also face discrimination? Do we know anything about that?
So no, that didn't come up at all, but I highly doubt it because he didn't reference him or any of the people by name.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So like
okay.
one of the things that I asked was, and I asked him and I asked the publishers, did the publisher get in trouble? Right.
Yeah. Right.
Because and I tried to get information about like from the publisher, like what happened, like how did the story get up, like were you worried? You know, I asked them all those sort of tension type questions, but nobody at the publishing house still knew. Right. And like
that would make a good story. Yeah.
That's that part of history is like not there. But Hyun Ki-young told me that the publisher, Beck, I can't remember his name right now, but I can, it's in the story. He was an American educated elite. And the Park Chung-hee administration was like pro-American administration. So there was an inability to
little leeway, huh?
Yeah, to crack down on them, but they took it out on Hyun Ki-young instead.
Yeah. I mean, the story itself and the book itself really took on a life of itself. Why do I keep saying itself? Took on a life of its own with people literally photocopying it and distributing it by themselves.
Yeah, that's wild, right? Like,
yeah, that's really interesting. They were like, well, we are going to, share this information and just kind of put it down and copy it and go.
Yeah, I would love to have seen a copy, like if one of those Xerox copies still exists, right?
Right.
I even asked the publishing house, like, do you have a photo of or an image of the cover of that issue? Something that I can put in the article. They didn't have anything.
Wow. So much lost. And he didn't have any of that still, any of those things still, I guess.
He may have. I just didn't want to bother him to bring it down from Seoul. I was just
precious time, to spend with him.
I was just happy to see him. Yeah, like I had 2.5 hours, 2 hours. So there's a lot.
That's amazing.
That I didn't get to include in the article. Like I asked him about the inspiration, like, because I'm a wannabe fiction writer too. So I had all these like fiction questions for him, like where did the inspiration come for Suni Samchon, and who's the titular character of the story who dies by suicide. Her name is Suni Samchon. And he was telling me, that character is based on like a family relative of his own who, so because the more I started talking to him, the more I realized that the story is kind of about him very much. He
loosely based on,
he is the main character in many ways, because it happened that the main character would have been about the same age as him when he wrote the story, which often happens. And not that he was a businessman in Seoul, but I just noticed that there were some connections between him and the main character, which makes sense.
Yes, of course. But does he when you were interviewing him, did you have a translator?
Yes. Yeah. I have my trusty translator who's does all my Sasam stuff with me. Yeah. She's like my partner in crime on this. Yeah.
That was really good. Yeah. So with something like the 75th anniversary coming up, does he often get invited and included in these ceremonies? I mean, is he an integral part? Do we know much about that?
I've never seen him.
First of all, it's hard to get invites to any of those things. I'll just say. Yeah. But you got invited since you.
I'm going.
You need to invite your partner on the podcast, don't you think?
Are you able to go?
I'm 100% able to go.
I have to go for work.
But
we can talk about that after.
Yeah, let's talk about that after.
He does a lot of stuff with the foundation. I don't know if he comes to the events, that event itself.
Yeah.
But
because you referenced in the article, he's still working with the 4-3 Foundation.
Yeah, and he recently handed out like some literary award. They give a literary award every year, and he did that with the foundation. So he's still active, and he's still writing about it, right? So he's still active in different realms. But this sort of event that's coming up on April 3rd is more for, not that he's not a victim's family, but it's a very dignified dignitary thing where they go there and they pay their respects to the tombs that are there. And then the president's, I don't think President Yoon's coming this year. He came last year.
Yeah. Very interesting decision, by the way. I think we can reference that. Very interesting decision for him not to come. Yeah. For the 75th.
I haven't looked into why he's not coming yet. I mean, there's something, he might not even be here. He might be in a different country or Japan, which may not be an excuse for some people but I honestly don't know how I feel about it, but it is what it is. We'll see
who does get
and so there's going to be speeches. It's usually pretty much, it's going to be the same thing sort of that they do every year. It might be the first large event again since COVID.
Right.
They've been doing it very small in the last few years. And they usually have 10,000 people there. Like, it's a lot of people that come to this event.
Wow.
And for the next podcast, I'll be writing something about it for my news org.
So we can
for that, and then we can talk about the stuff that doesn't get involved in again, because that's something more interesting, than necessarily what needs to be preserved.
Right. It's an addition. Yeah. But having said that, we should probably, in this episode, maybe reference some of our past episodes where do you remember the numbers on those? Because I don't.
Oh, we have special primers that we're going to be posting again so either go back and see them in our YouTube channel, but if not, you can listen to them. I'll be reposting them in the podcast feed, so they'll come up on April 3rd again. And they're a 2-part primer on the history of the Jeju Massacre. That's part 1, and part 2 is sort of the after effects of the massacre, the journey to truth and reconciliation that it ends with the apology of Roh Min-hyun, and includes interview with 2 academics who study political apologies. And it also encompasses Suni Samchon as well.
It does, yeah. Really important lessons, I think, for anyone that's living on the island to know more about, what you're living amongst and, the land you're living on. And then for those that don't live here, just some fascinating and sad and horrible pieces of history. That has just been glossed over, in all these years. So really good listens for anyone that's a little bit of a history buff, I think.
And the thing about Suni Samchon that I would suggest people to read is how contemporary the conversations people have in the book about what to do with it, how to remember, how to treat. Like, they discuss about, holding people accountable, arresting them, and what the massacre actually is, what caused it, and does it really matter at this point to know, which kind of leads up into our interview. We were fortunate enough to snag an interview with Jeongmin Kim, the lead correspondent for NK News and editorial director of South Korea Pro, concerning recent scandals about a Seoul politician kind of causing huge waves.
Causing big waves.
So with the 75th anniversary of the Jeju Massacre on the horizon, a recent scandal has actually come to our shores from Seoul, which doesn't usually happen. Now, to explain this recent controversy involving Jeju 4-3, we have lead correspondent for NK News and editorial director at Korea Pro, Jeongmin Kim, with us today to talk about it. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
So nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
We're all followers of you on Twitter. We're big fans.
Thank you. So generous.
I'm a fan of your cat. I'll just put that out there.
He's right there.
Yeah,
right now.
Maybe we can put him on screen. Part of the Twitter fandom.
Yeah.
So before we gush more over you and how much we appreciate your content, you recently wrote an article for NK News about this recent scandal. Could you walk us through exactly what happened?
Well, this happened during the run-up to the big election at the People Power Party, which was actually yesterday. People Power Party was holding 2 elections. One was for the party leadership and one was for what they call Supreme Council. It's a very high-profile, high-level decision-making body in the party, and it means a lot for the lawmakers. So what the lawmakers usually do is they go to provinces, cities outside Seoul to meet their supporters and conduct speeches, sometimes catering to the audience of that specific area. And defector lawmaker Tae Yong-ho, he is the lawmaker that represents a very affluent district, Gangnam in Seoul. And he went to Jeju as part of his election activities, and he went there to make a speech. But right before he done that, he went to the memorial altar for the victims of the Jeju Massacre, and he kneeled down and and apparently he said a few words at the altar that he shared afterwards on his personal Facebook page, and reporters wrote about it. And that enraged a lot of victims' families and a lot of activist groups as well. Because of the content of his remarks, he was saying that as someone who used to work for the Kim Il-sung family regime of North Korea, which he referred to, who were the prime movers in the Jeju April 3 incident, I hereby kneel down to ask for forgiveness to all of the victims who were unjustly sacrificed and their bereaved families. So this is a very loaded sentence. And after he apologized for his former government, the involvement of Communist Party in the history of the massacre, it's already a very, very sensitive issue, especially for the victim's family. And for him to say that without much context in Jeju at the altar, it brought a lot of attention from South Korean media. And afterwards, because he got so much criticism, he tried to explain what he meant by it. And he was using the other election speeches in Jeju and in other places as well to say that he actually learned that in North Korea when he was a student, and that he actually believes that. And he was giving his version of what he knows as history to South Korean supporters, which wasn't received well from both aisles of the party, it seems.
I thought that was really interesting. There's so much to talk about, but just that last part of your introduction, where he talked about that he went to school, and he's like basically saying, I learned this from my textbooks in North Korea where I went to university. So he really like put another stamp on it, kind of saying, no, really, this is what I learned. This is what I believe.
Well, and also you cannot really verify that unless you also worked or studied in North Korea. And actually, Ju Sung-ha, another high-profile defector in Seoul, who is currently a reporter at a major news outlet, he actually went on, I think, radio interview and said that although he was also living in Pyongyang, he has never learned that. But it is true that North Koreans use that as a propaganda to show that there were actual loyalists in South Korea during the state building period for Kim Il-sung, which is true. But he was saying that it's more of a subtle matter, that it's not in like textbook, but that maybe some elite people learn about that as part of propaganda.
Yeah.
And afterwards, Tae Yong-ho wrote multiple statements explaining what he meant by it. He said that he's not saying that the government and the state violence is something to forgive. He said that recognizing that, plus how there were communist instruction directly for Kim Il-sung, that he thinks that both things has to be recognized. And he doubled down on that basically even after criticism.
Yeah, I think he even had another press conference, didn't he, on February 15th, maybe? Yeah. No, he was referred to the ethics committee over it, but he also had another press conference, I believe, where he, like you said, doubled down and said, no, the instructions for the uprising on April 3rd came directly from Pyongyang, which is wild accusation. Like, it's wild to think of that because of the implications of it, you know? What was your first response when you heard this, when you were like tasked with covering it?
Well, when because I know the lawmaker Tae Yong-ho, Congressman Tae Yong-ho, like I have known him for many years, and like looking at him from press point of view, looking at how he conducts election procedures, I don't think from my perspective, it seemed like he actually meant it. It seemed like he actually meant to apologize. He sincerely wanted to somehow apologize. Of course, there's a strategy attached to it because maybe from his point of view, he thought that apologizing will make sense as someone who wants Jeju votes. But then the problem is the history is very, very complicated. Especially if you look at the investigation report from the early 2000s. they do mention the South Korea chapter of the Workers' Party, but because
the manual.
Yes, but because it's such a controversial topic, there's an entire chapter in the investigation dedicated to whether or not there were direct instructions from the headquarters of the South Korea chapter of the Workers' Party Korea or Pyongyang. And investigation concluded that there's no solid evidence that there was direct instruction. But during his multiple statements afterwards, Tae Yong-ho was saying he was, along with how he was taught about Kim Il-sung's involvement on Jeju incident, he said that Kim Il-sung ordered on all people uprising at the time in general, which is true. And the Workers' Party of South Korea's 남조선 노동당 Jeju chapter, following such instruction, also led armed rebellion in Jeju, was his claim. And he said that because he saw so many criticism, he said that all I asked for was forgiveness from the innocent victims that were cruelly murdered. And he was saying, I hope they take my apology as offered with a pure heart and sincerity, and not use it politically. But then when a politician says something, everything is used politically. And I think he knew that. And of course, it's got a lot of accusations of distorting history from the Democratic Party. And also, interestingly, even his own colleagues in the People Power Party.
That was an interesting part of your article when you mentioned how no one wanted to side with him in this particular incident. Do you think that, because we sort of talked about the politics, like I said, we have so much to talk about, but do you think that he is uneducated about Jeju 4-3 in how do I say this, in total?
Well, I think maybe first of all, I think even in South Korea, not everybody has read the entire investigation report. And also, not to mention that in the textbooks, like I've learned in high school, you only see it in one page. So nobody really knows clearly about the details of the history. So it's really easy to just get into like bits of information that are in media and try to match those together. And I think that is what may have happened to him. Maybe he didn't read the entire investigation report or because it was under the progressive government, he maybe thought it was there were inappropriate investigation results in the report. Maybe he thought that. And I think he was insinuating about that. Yeah.
There's a lot of I wouldn't say issues with the investigation result itself, but it is very dense and very complicated with and the fact that we don't have an official title for the Jeju Massacre or Jeju Sasam because we don't fully understand what it is, right?
Exactly.
So I think part of this amorphous place that we are with the history of what it is contributes to people distorting history. And that's partially because people don't fully know what it is. When in English, I follow a lot of conversations about Sasam online. And I've said this before, that the main way people talk about it has nothing to do with Jeju or the survivor. It has to do with the political implications of it. A lot of people want to use it to bash the United States or to, either pro-North Korea in some ways, but it's never really about the nuanced issues that are involved in it. And I think that's sort of why we still get into this situation where we don't really know what happened. It's being politically pulled in so many different ways. Like years ago, I did a story about how the museum has been sued a dozen times over information that could be incorrect in it, or maybe not incorrect, but not given as much of attention as other aspects of it. And when I interviewed people there, they're like, yeah, there's, like those things did happen, right? So there is this uncertainty about really what happened on Jeju 75 years ago. And I think that's really the crux of...
I think that's a good way to say it. Uncertainty is a really good word.
Yeah, well, I mean, how we only started investigating it in truth 25 years ago? Well, more than that now because it's 2023. But like, you know, after Suni Samchon came out, then when we started the movement in 1978, the movement to start uncovering the truth of what happened, a lot can be lost or misinterpreted, and, you know, or because of how complicated it is, it's easy to pick and choose what information you want to prove your points. Now,
and that's
No, continue.
I think that's why it's being it's studied extensively by the academics who look at memory politics, right? It's not just about finding documents that can reveal so-called facts about what happened decades ago. It's also about how it's being remembered, how it's being framed, how it's used in contemporary politics. That's why this case of the congressman is very interesting. It was a state building period. There was no North Korea or South Korea. It was at the verge of being created. And from just ordinary people's perspective who lived in Jeju at the time or anywhere else on the Korean peninsula, it's unclear who the enemy is and who the government is, who the power is, who's on my side, who's the enemy. It's very unclear. And from their point of view, just violence is violence. And they want to do something about it. So retrospectively, interpreting that part of the history always has to be, it cannot not be political. That's why politicians have to be careful about it, because it reproduces a certain way of seeing a very uncertain era from contemporary point of view, where now we have North Korea and South Korea. We know what communism is, and we hate it because because we are past that state building period now, and apparently democracy won. But it was a different time at the time. So it's really retrospectively creating a type of memory. So I think that's why politicians from both ends in South Korea were being very, very careful responding to Congressman Tae's comment.
Yeah, that's a good. Well, I interviewed somebody recently, a couple weeks back, who was in Jeongmin. I do a lot of research about Jeongmin, and that's exactly what he said. He said there was a North Korean or a communism rally in Jeongmin at that time, but nobody knew what they were rallying for. It was and I think that is such an interesting point, because a lot of people might ignore the fact that these rallies happened completely because they don't want to connect it to communism. But yet a lot of people who have spoken to me, they say they had no idea what was going on. They had no idea what communism was, not really what democracy was. They were actually too busy just trying to survive the famine and cholera and everything else that was stricken and going on the island at that time. But you mentioned this.
Darryl, can I want to interrupt you just for the common listener. When you say they didn't know what was going on at the time, are you saying we now, looking back, can't say what the rally was for, or that the people around were not aware what the rally was for? Can you clarify that?
Well, we know what communism is now, right? And and what it means in a Korean context, in a Korean peninsula context. Back then, they didn't, right? North Korea, the communism in itself didn't have this negative connotations it has now in a democratic lens, right? So and having a rally at, and not really sure what it is, political rally, I would probably go out and see what it is.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
Maybe some people truly understood what communism was that was like spearheading this thing, but not everybody. Most of them probably didn't.
That makes sense. And then that goes into, Jeongmin, one of the things I was curious about having read your article is, what exactly do you think that the Jeju people were so upset about? Being linked? What is it that the feeling was that there was this just outcry against him?
That's actually what I wanted to ask you. Being on the ground in Jeju, I was actually curious, but there were a few Victims Family Association that came to Seoul to protest against that. And I reviewed what they were saying. It seems like they were actually referring back to the investigation report. They were saying that it was already concluded that there was no direct instruction to the rally from the headquarters of the Workers' Party Korea, and now you're revising that, a revisionist view of the history, basically. I think that part was officially what they were mad about, distorting history. But then if you think about it from family's point of view, if anyone lived in Jeju at the time, they would have been impacted. And to say that it was instructed directly by Kim Il-sung, even if you call them victims, it creates a weird dynamics where you start thinking, oh, so people said yes to a communist rally, and that makes it difficult for the families to explain to others what happened and why. So I think they were upset partly because of that. And another part was how it was used politically from Congressman Tae, because he was visiting the island for the votes. He was going there for the election. And to choose that as his talking point, I think that was also upsetting just for Jeju people in general as well. And Democratic Party, of course, they also wrote a statement that was, they wrote a statement saying that, Congressman Tae, you have to stop using the propaganda tactics that you learned in Korea.
Yep.
They said that, so they went for that angle.
Really did. They dropped that word real quick.
So let's think about this for a second. If it had been actually sent from North Korea as a message to conduct that attack, what would that mean?
If there was a direct instruction. Yeah,
if Kim Il-sung ordered that attack on April 3rd, 1948 to attack the polling stations and the government officials and all that kind of stuff.
From my point of view, it really doesn't change anything that much from when you look at it from the perspective of how Kim Il-sung wanted a separate Korea in the northern part of the peninsula. It doesn't change anything about that. Right. It always had that motivation. And that's why people talk about how there was an upcoming election in South Korea, and they'd like to link to that. But it does change things from how it's being remembered, because it makes it into a very black and white sort of picture. From people's point of view, they had many things to rally about, not just because some supreme leader gave them instruction.
This is my possible thought of what that might change, and feel free to disagree. But if North Korea if Kim Il-sung did give that order, and they did respond with such a strong reaction that resulted in the deaths of 30,000, the South Korean government responded with that reaction that resulted in the deaths of 30,000 people, wouldn't that potentially, that piece of knowledge potentially somewhat, not justifies the wrong word, but it would take a little bit away of the guilt away potentially from the government for the deaths of the people, because it was literally the beginning. It would literally be the beginning of the Korean War, which some scholars,
taking it out of their hands.
Right. I think first part of I guess the first few days of the intervention might be justified, but from my point of view, it doesn't change anything about how there was state violence against people afterwards, after that few days, that they wanted to get rid of potential spies or potential Communist Party vanguards. It doesn't change the fact that they continued that for years.
Right. But what I mean, I'm not trying to say that, like, I'm saying that it could be used to lessen the responsibility of the violence. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying as a propaganda
That's how that is being used by many right-wing YouTubers, right-wing commentators. That's how they frame it, because of course, usually that type of group is linked to how they think that Ri Sung-man is such a perfect leader during that period. So it could be used like that they were trying to protect the country.
And another reason that it may be so controversial here is the fact that the island has worked so hard to distance themselves from being called commies. and from being called a red island. I think it's
still ongoing.
Yeah. Well, the recent bullying scandal, right? With Yoon's former colleague, he recently resigned from what is the position that he had? I can't think of it off the top of my head. Where is it? I have it on my notes.
I think
Chung Sun-shin. He was alongside President Yoon Suk-yeol in the public prosecution's office. He resigned recently after being appointed to the head the police's national office investigation over his son bullying a Jeju student in high school at a prestigious dormitory, and he was calling him a commie. And he was calling him a Jeju pig, but also a commie, which is kind of like connected to this issue because Jeju people have been, called that, and that term has been used until like 2000 to belittle and to prevent Jeju people from really actually participating in society. I've known people who had to move to the mainland to escape their association with Jeju, and they had to pretend that they weren't from here just in order to get jobs, and they were still hounded by police who found out who they, just because
their criminal history.
Exactly. So I think that is one of the reasons why the local people would be upset about again being connected to for this issue to again be connected to communism and to North Korea.
Right. It has been a long struggle, and I think it was interesting how the families were citing what the president himself promised to the Jeju people a year ago. He said that he will work his best to make sure that the Jeju people are not defamed or by distorted history. And that's why he visited Jeju at the time. And I think that's why, because they know how much struggle that the Jeju residents have gone through in the past decades. And from political calculation, People Power Party knows this. And because they need the votes, I think that's why even the conservative, the most conservative lawmakers in that party, like Chung Jin-seok, they were drawing a line between Congressman Tae and them, saying that this is not a party line. You have to be more careful. We will do our best following Yoon's instruction to make sure that people are not defamed.
Right. And so then to kind of wrap that, to go back to what you first said about the election was today? Yesterday. So what was the result of that?
He won.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Because it was him, my first reaction when I heard this was I wanted to know if he had extra information we didn't.
I was also curious because it didn't seem like he crafted a lie. It seemed like he actually believed and wanted to apologize. And that's what struck me as very interesting. And I would love to know more what he has been taught in North Korea. If that's the case, I would love to interview him.
Right.
To figure out what kind of pieces of information that led to the conclusion. He was citing some parts of history that he learned in North Korea and knows from what he learned in South Korea, as well as citing some of the close Kim Il-sung aides at the time and how some of them defected back to North Korea and they were considered loyal, considered martyrs. They were heroified in North Korea. But then so far I couldn't see hard evidence to support his main claim.
He said 4 people, I believe. 4 people defected, went back on North Korean boats or something like that. I'm only familiar with one person who went back, and that's Kim Dal-sam, who is the leader of the uprising on that day, and he died on fighting for North Korea during the Korean War. But I don't know how he got back there, and all of a sudden there's 3 other people that potentially went back on some sort of North Korean boat. Yeah. From where? Where did there's just a lot of questions that I would like to ask him about that.
He'd be fun to have on the podcast. I also thought part of your article was really interesting because you did bring up that even in South Korea, in the textbooks in South Korea, it was only amended, and I can't quote the year because my memory is horrible, but South Korea textbooks were only amended not so long ago. So it does seem plausible that what was being taught in North Korea, maybe it's not so far-fetched.
Right. I'm scared to ask my dad about it because probably the older generations in South Korea were also taught that it was a communist uprising. It was noted as communist-linked uprising for decades, and then after democratization, they dropped it, but it was still mentioned as uprising. But it was only amended just a few years ago when the textbooks were decentralized.
Right.
But there are currently movements to change some parts of the textbooks back. So that's a space to keep an eye on as well, because there's a lot of other histories in South Korea and modern contemporary era that's going to be involved in that kind of changes.
Recently was up for debate too, about the inclusion of Sasam in the history textbooks, and I believe Yoon's administration decided to keep it as is for now. But I mean, it could still change. So what do you think this says about the current state of 4-3, the fact that this scandal happened?
I think it shows how little Koreans know about it.
Yes.
I also feel guilty about it because I only learned about Jeju Sasam in college because my professors were really into memory politics, and some of them are academics that study the Jeju Sasam. And because I was in Asian studies, I got to luckily learn about that. And not just that, but also Nogunri incidents and other red baiting massacres, small and big massacres during the state building period on the Korean peninsula. And I personally have experience hearing about this from my grandma, who was also almost became the victim of red baiting at the time, because it was really unclear who's who. So it's a real part of the history for everybody, but then we don't get to learn the details. And I could see from the replies to the incident of Congressman Tae's remark that everybody has different ideas about what this is. Some people don't even really know about this. And also matched with lack of knowledge and sensitivity, political sensitivity,
yes.
it's a great recipe for disaster. It's very prone to being used one way or another every time there's a political event. And every time that happens, residents of Jeju will face the struggle. So I think way forward would be to be able to teach the full detail of the investigation as much as possible for the younger generations before it gets distorted and then handed down to history.
Yeah. On one hand, I guess that's a good reason for the Jeju Families Association to constantly be on guard and ready to come back up against something like this. They hear it, they make a stand, they go and protest, So on one hand, they really need to be diligent.
I believe that's the main function of those associations. Yeah. Talking to Hyun Ki-young, the author of Suni Samchon recently, he was saying, I asked him about that same question I asked you, what do you think of the state of Sasam? And he said it's going to go up and down. It's going to be tugged back and forth based on the political control of the of the country. But as long as those associations are there to stand guard, the truth will be kept, will be saved, right? Yeah. So, do you
also just final thoughts from me? I think it's also for education purposes. I think it's important that an administration, especially not just particularly Yoon administration, but any South Korean administration, I think it's important to teach the younger generations that history during the state building period, or just right now, contemporary, it's not black and white. There are a lot of uncertainties going on. It's not just about learning bullet points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that happened this year. There is a lot of different dynamics that work in a different way at certain era. So if you look back at incidents like Jeju or Nogunri too, from today's perspective, it's very easy to distort and remember the distorted versions. So I think it's important for the history education to remain subtle and nuanced as much as possible. And I think administration should really work hard to do that, I think.
Seems a long time coming, Yeah. So, yeah.
That's why I think these next couple of years are actually really important to speak to as many survivors as possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because we don't have that much time left, right? But so thank you very much for being on our show. If you ever do get to interview Tae, we have to have you come back on again to tell us how that goes.
Gosh. That would be interesting. Yeah.
And in the meanwhile, I'm planning to baseline some of the North Korean state media. That's what I do, North Korean state media, to figure out if they actually did mention Jeju Sasam and those people that Congressman Tae mentioned, if how are they using it these days to frame the history. I think that will also be important to cross-check some of the things that are being said.
Yeah, you have a really interesting job, and I do want to encourage our listeners to check out your Twitter because it's really fascinating. Just not only can we see pictures of your cats, but we, just going through your Twitter wall, and just seeing all the little things. Like I really enjoyed is I find it very interesting your knowledge, with the daughter right now. That was a lot of interesting articles and a lot of interesting comments, and your comments about the daughter coming into play with this recent ceremony. And anyways, I encourage all our listeners to go check out your Twitter.
Thank you.
It's really interesting.
We'll have a link to it in the show notes for everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's so generous of you.
it's the least we could do.
Yeah.
But
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, that was one heck of an interview. Yeah?
Yeah, I hope we can have her on again in the future.
Absolutely. I bet she just has so much to talk about. Her job is fascinating.
And very eloquent, I found. She explained this quite well, as opposed to me, who I felt like was just bleh, just couldn't get the information out correctly.
Both of us, stumble over our words. But she says it very clearly in it. Yeah, that was great. I think so much to talk to her about just random things. So hopefully,
And please follow her on Twitter. And, she got really great information there.
Right. As I referenced numerous times, I think in that interview, I follow her on Twitter, and she's one of my main sources of information just on really fascinating stuff. Yeah.
And her handle is just at Jeongmin Kim, no space, GONGMINN Kim. And she's great.
We'll post a link to that as well.
Yeah, lots of great information there. And that's been our episode back, thankfully.
Yeah, our episode back. And so having said that, Darryl and I, we are back, but we do, it is a lot of work to do a podcast. We're not, Darryl is the producer, he's the editor, he's, the co-host, and I'm, I don't know what my title is, but then I am. But no matter what, it takes a lot of work. So, and this is all just done, this is like our passion project. Would you say that? It's a passion project. We are currently looking for a little bit of help because it's overwhelming. We would love if there's any of our listeners or a couple of our listeners, we want to create more of a team that wants to be part of this project. And specifically, we're looking for help with our social media. I think Darryl and I liked Instagram until I had to be in charge or do so much for the podcast, and then I really started disliking it so much. But it's an important tool to communicate and to spread information. And so we're really looking for help to create a team with our social media. Any graphic artists, anyone that's thinks they're really good at posting and can be responsible and help us take on a little bit additional work. So please give us a ring ding ding.
If you're interested in wanting to advance your skills and get learn some things, because I've learned a lot from doing this, but it's just a lot.
Yeah. It is a lot. And
just us. I think if we spread it out, it's not so much, and it could be fun, and we could have a community, a team.
It would be great. And we do get a lot of recognition for this podcast. So your work would be, whatever work you do would be credited. I know we're kind of pushing it, but it would be credited. Your work would be credited. It can go on your resumes, that sort of thing. And like I said, we do get a lot of recognition in the, all over, not just Jeju. We get a lot of recognition on the, from the mainland and in the government as well. I've been invited to take part in several things because of this podcast. So, anyways, if anyone feels like they might have something to offer and could maybe jump on a team with us, just give one of us a shout or message our page or anything, really.
Yeah, Instagram or Facebook. You can contact us. We have an email as well, which is, meyouandjeju@gmail.com. But we look forward to hearing from you. If you also have questions, thoughts, concerns, hopes, dreams,
Always.
worries, fears, you can email them there too.
Not too much. Don't share too much with us. We don't need all that.
Share everything. I want to know.
We don't need all your hopes and dreams. But if you got questions or you want to talk to us about anything about Jeju, we are here for you.
All right. Until next time. Ciao.
Ciao.